Margaret and William had the kind of love that others envied. Their relationship had been built over a decade of trust, laughter, and shared dreams. Living in a picturesque home in Charleston, South Carolina, they had created a life that seemed perfect on the outside. Margaret, a soft-spoken woman with a kind heart, had always trusted William blindly. He was charming, intelligent, and had an undeniable way of making her feel like the only woman in the world. As a successful architect, William spent long hours at work, but he always assured Margaret that she was his priority. But love, no matter how deep, is sometimes not enough to protect against secrets. Lately, Margaret had noticed a shift in William's behavior. He had become distant, his eyes often clouded with thoughts she couldn't decipher. The late nights at the office became more frequent, and the affectionate gestures that once defined their love started to fade. It wasn't just his absence that troubled Margaret, it was the change in his demeanor. He no longer looked at her the same way. His embrace felt forced, and his phone had become an extension of his hand, always guarded. A sinking feeling grew in Margaret's chest, but she pushed it away. Doubt was a seed that, once planted, could destroy everything, and she wasn't ready to let go of the love they had built. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Margaret found the first clue. As she picked up William's jacket from the chair, a faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume filled her senses. It wasn't hers. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself that it was probably from a colleague. But the gnawing doubt only grew stronger when she noticed a single lipstick stain on his collar, deep crimson, a shade she never wore. Her hands trembled as she placed the jacket back, her heart hammering against her ribs. Was she imagining things? Or was there something far more sinister lurking beneath their seemingly perfect marriage? Margaret decided not to confront William right away. Instead, she began observing him more closely. She paid attention to the way he avoided eye contact, the way his phone was always face down, and the way he suddenly started showering her with random gifts, as if overcompensating for something. Her suspicions grew stronger when she overheard a hushed phone call. Standing outside his study one night, she heard him say, "I can't talk now." She's home. Margaret felt her stomach drop. Who was he talking to? And why was he hiding it? Determined to uncover the truth, Margaret hired a private investigator. She felt guilty for going behind William's back, but the agony of not knowing was far worse. Days later, she received the report. The photographs were undeniable. William was meeting another woman, embracing her, kissing her. The woman, Eleanor, was someone he had supposedly ended things with years ago. Margaret's world came crashing down. The man she had loved for so many years, the one she had trusted above all else, had been lying to her. When William walked through the door that evening, Margaret stood in the dimly lit living room, holding the photographs in her trembling hands. "Who is she?" Margaret's voice was eerily calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm raging inside her. William froze, his face draining of color. "Margaret, I can explain." "No," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "No more lies." The silence that followed was suffocating. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I never meant to hurt you." Margaret laughed bitterly. "But you did." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had spent too long loving a man who had been unfaithful to her. The days that followed were filled with pain, anger, and self-reflection. Margaret had a choice: stay and try to mend what was broken, or walk away and start anew. She chose herself. Leaving William was the hardest decision she had ever made, but it was also the most empowering. She refused to be a victim of his betrayal. Instead, she embraced the pain, using it to fuel her journey toward healing. As she stood on the threshold of her new life, she realized that sometimes, the end of one love story is just the beginning of another. One where she was the protagonist, choosing happiness on her own terms.